Developments on the war in the Persian Gulf anytime the situation warrants. Also from time to time today, we'll be giving you telephone numbers set up by the Defense Department for family members. Now back to CBS.
Are smart. Watching CBS News continuing coverage of Showdown in the Gulf. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
Storylines of the hour in our continuing coverage of Gulf War. Tomahawk missile attacks resume. Allied warplanes are pounding Baghdad again. The White House urges Saddam Hussein to lay down his arms. Iraq says that 44 planes have been shot down. The Allies say it is only 3 planes. An Iraqi envoy warns of chemical attack if Allied troops enter Kuwait. CBS News correspondent David Martin at the Pentagon reports U.S. battleships in the Gulf have launched another wave of Tomahawk cruise missiles. At least 100 were fired during last night. Comrades on the ground wished good luck to fellow U.S. pilots taking off from a base inside Saudi Arabia on more bombing missions inside Iraq and Kuwait. At least 1,000 air sorties have been flown so far. At the Pentagon, Joint Chiefs Chairman Colin Powell talked of successes so far.
We're very satisfied with that level of performance on the part of our aircraft. We are pleased with the initial results. We have damaged the command and control capability of the Iraqi government and the Iraqi armed forces. We believe we have done reasonably well, as best we know right now, with the preliminary bomb damage assessment in attacking airfields, attacking fixed Scud facilities around the countryside.
Colin Powell. There are new pictures now of Saudi oil installations still smoking from last night's attack by Iraqi artillery. It's one isolated installation up near the Kuwaiti border. It's one of the few Iraqi counterstrikes reported so far. The installation is several miles south of the Kuwaiti border along the Persian Gulf inside Saudi Arabia. Prices on Wall Street remain sharply higher today. Oil prices remain sharply lower. Now, CBS News reporter James Stewart is at the Pentagon, where everyone is wondering when this air war turns into a ground offensive. Jim, what are the chances that, given the apparent success of the air war, that the schedule for the ground offensive will be moved up?
Well, Dan, everyone here would seem to think that that would come sooner rather than later. Clearly, forces are coiling there. There have been indications that there have been shadowboxing, as one official puts it, perhaps even some exchanges of artillery. However, we are told that no forces, no U.S. ground combat forces, have crossed over into occupied Kuwait, and there's been no direct exchange of fire with Iraqi troops there. The air war continues to go, as you point out, extremely well. Pentagon does confirm, as we reported earlier, that another wave of Tomahawk missiles is en route to their targets. We don't know the precise size of that wave, Dan, but the first time that the Navy launched these, they put about 100 in the air, which, as David Martin reports earlier, raises the question of inventory. We know that there are only about 500 of these on Navy ships in the area. Now, earlier, about 2 hours earlier, F-117s, and what appeared to be a mirror image of yesterday's strike against Iraq, moved on targets in Baghdad. It was about that time, Dan, that, of course, we heard that Iraqi TV went off the air.
Jim Stewart at the Pentagon. One of the questions of the hour: how soon, how large the ground offensive? Here in New York, prices on the stock exchange have been going crazy. Rob McEwen is at the New York Stock Exchange. Rob?
And it's been a very, very strong day on the New York Stock Exchange. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up over 100 points so far. More to the point, the price of oil is down, the biggest one-day drop in the history of oil price records. Down now, barrel of crude at the moment is down $10.25 from the start of business today. The price of gold is down almost $30 an ounce. Now, speaking to some people here who are trying to put this enthusiasm on Wall Street into perspective, they caution that this is quite unprecedented, certainly on the occasion that a major war has broken out. The First World War, Korea, Pearl Harbor, the major events of Vietnam all triggered a reversal in the Dow Jones average. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find an occasion, an equivalent occasion, and certainly for a war in the Middle East, with a better economic scenario. But analysts say that some of this may be short-lived. And I think a lot of the people here know that. A lot of this is happening on emotion and sentiment today, and analysts say that because of that, it may well be reversible. And there may be a second problem, according to some of the people to whom we've spoken, and that is that the emotion and the enthusiasm of this day on Wall Street may have also obscured the fact that certain economic problems associated with the recession began before August the 2nd and may continue after the conflict in the Middle East is over. So, in the face of a very strong day at the New York Stock Exchange, some words of caution.
At the State Department, Bill Plant reports on the scattered reports of terrorism around the world. Bill?
Dan, terrorism is a very real prospect, something that the State Department has taken notice of, has warned us about. The administration is clearly a little bit on edge. You mentioned scattered reports of terrorism, and indeed there have been some. But as far as we know, every single specific report, and there have been about a half a dozen of them, has been knocked down when it was checked out. So we don't know at this hour of any firmly documented act of terrorism anywhere in the world against Americans or American installations. We do know that there's great concern about it. A cable went out from here about 7 o'clock last night, same time the war started, roughly, to every American diplomatic installation around the world, warning them to be on guard. And today at the State Department briefing, spokesperson Margaret Tutwiler said that there were no specific or credible threats, but they take the possibility of terrorism, she said, very, very seriously. Even the level of security here at the State Department has stepped up about 10 notches from yesterday, with more guards, more blockades, more searching than I can remember any time since I've been around here.
Bill Plant at the State Department. Bernard Goldberg, you've been watching this story as it develops, and you make an interesting point that while these are scattered acts of terrorism, there's no empirical evidence that we know of that they are put forth by the Iraqis or their allies.
Right. We've been getting these reports all day. We don't know to what extent they're true to begin with, as Bill just mentioned. But as you just said, Dan, there's no evidence whatsoever that the Iraqis are behind it, and there's a very good possibility that it's nothing more than old-fashioned American anti-Americanism because of the U.S. involvement in the Gulf.
Well, another reminder that one of the things we know is how little we know about what is actually happening. This is not unusual in any war. In fact, it is the usual. So many things are happening in so many places. This is particularly true of the battlefield situation, that while everything looks positive, the success of the operation in the early stages seems clear at the moment. There's an awful lot we don't know, and that's the case with these scattered acts of terrorism. CBS News White House correspondent Leslie Stahl is standing by at the White House in Washington. Leslie, what about President Bush's frame of mind today? Has to be pretty good based on the military reports.
Well, frankly, we're getting somewhat of a mixed message. First of all, he's having a cabinet meeting right now. He's briefing his cabinet on whatever he knows. The early signals out of the White House were that any sense of euphoria should be dampened. The press secretary had a very long briefing in which he warned that the White House expects this operation not to be easy, not to be over quickly. The president is determined to see this through to the end. Many long days. No one should expect that what we're seeing in these early reports will continue. On the other hand, Dan, the president, we're told, will most likely go to Camp David for the weekend. The press secretary said life must go on in the country. We must get back to some sense of normality. So I see that as somewhat of a mixed message. We see the president with that same sense of determination and seriousness that we've seen all along. He went to a prayer service today, and he is getting continuous reports throughout the day. We may get some tape of his cabinet meeting. Some crews have been allowed in to see at least the beginning of it. So we may get a picture of the president coming out of here shortly.
In the Gulf itself, confirmation of the report earlier today by CBS News correspondent Scott Pelley. U.S. and Saudi military officials in Saudi Arabia now confirm that ground forces are moving north and have taken up positions closer to the Kuwaiti border. It is not clear whether the movement is in preparation for any offensive. During last night and all through the early morning hours, there was a widespread belief that the air attacks would continue for days, perhaps many days, perhaps 10 days to 2 weeks before any ground offensive started. The movement toward the Kuwaiti border raises the question of whether perhaps the schedule for a ground offensive, if there is to be one, will be moved up. That's one of the stories we're watching as it develops during this late afternoon and on into the early evening. Bob McNamara is in Denver, where he's been following domestic reaction to events in the Gulf. Bob?
Dan, it's been pretty much a quiet day here. A few rallies, peace rallies, also a rally downtown here in Denver in support of President Bush. But by and large, it's been business as usual, with the exception here and there of heightened security at the airport, at the state capitol, and at military installations, federal buildings here in the city. By the way, there are 2,300 Coloradans who are on duty in the Persian Gulf today. It is believed to be the smallest contribution of the war effort by any state. But then the population here of 3 million has an awful lot to do with that. But from the small towns on the eastern plains to the desert mesas of the southwest, there is no small measure of concern for sons and daughters half a world away.
In southwestern Colorado, the little town of Ignacio is in the heart of the Southern Ute Indian Reservation. And for generations, the Utes, like the nearby Navajos and the Hopis, have sent sons to war.
That's me right here.
In the early 50s, Eldred Vigil served during the Korean conflict.
Right there.
And of his 7 children, 3 sons joined the Army. And now daughter Glenda is an Army specialist at war in the Persian Gulf. In his kitchen this morning, Vigil said he is as patriotic as anyone, but he is frightened by events.
I was sitting over here, and I was praying. And I prayed. I said, what's going on? I was mad too. I was sitting there, I cried. He said, well, my daughter wasn't over there, it'll be all right. It's not our country. It's their country. I don't like Bush. If he don't even have his own family fighting the war over there. I don't know why he's fighting for.
That, the anguish of a father worried about a daughter, a man who no doubt has seen a lot of unfairness in a lifetime. Dan?
Thanks, Bob. Crude oil prices collapsed in their biggest one-day fall in history. Prices plunged more than $9 a barrel, down into the $22 range in frantic trading late this morning on the New York Mercantile Exchange. And CBS News correspondent Robert Krulwich is here with some perspective and context on this roller coaster ride of oil prices.
Dan, what's just happened is that Exxon has decided to drop wholesale prices by a nickel. The announcement was made just a few minutes ago. Because Exxon is an industry leader, it is very likely that other oil companies across America will follow with nickel drops at wholesale. To put that a little bit in perspective, today the wholesale price of oil has dropped already 24 cents. So this is a nickel out of 24, but that price could go up and it could go down, so that's an interesting nickel. I should say also that gasoline prices would probably be affected in about 2 weeks, and we could expect that nickel to go right through, resulting in a nickel drop in prices in 2 weeks. Having said that, I should tell you that this is also the week that oil companies are going to announce their quarterly profits. And the quarterly profits for American oil companies for the last quarter of 1990 were very, very high. They have a bit of a public relations problem. If I have graphs to show you, I think you'll see the problem. Look at this. Unocal, Texaco, Sun Oil, and Mobil are announcing gigantic profits, according to Mr. George Friesen of Deutsche Bank. Here's another list. Second page. Exxon, 41%. British Petroleum, 111%. Interestingly enough, an oil company in the United States, Chevron, decided to do a survey of its own customers, and it asked them this question. Do you think that oil companies are taking advantage of the war situation? This was an oil company survey. 8 out of 10 of Chevron's customers told Chevron, you are taking advantage. So this nickel drop is in part, I think, a public relations
How is one to square this with President Bush's statement? He said it at least once, and I think twice, this is before the war started, that in effect profiteering on the war would not be allowed.
Oil companies are very sensitive to the president's admonition, very anxious to correct what they think is a misimpression in the public, but they do have these very large profits for the last quarter, and they know that how those profits are going to land in the public, so they are moving early and quickly to take a hit themselves today in the marketplace and nickel off.
Bob Krulwich, thanks. Our CBS News coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues.
There goes my stomach again. But I've had it up to here with this antacid taste. Then get great flavor up to here with the rich, fruity taste of Extra Strength Malox Plus Cherry Cream. Up to here with the fresh, minty taste of mint cream. And up to here with the zesty lemon taste of lemon Swiss cream. The strongest antacid tastes the best too. Extra Strength Malox Plus. Strong relief for all your Malox moments.
Malox, you're the best.
When 4 slender, no-fat calories taste like butter, it's got to be Molly.
The same medicine found in the prescription drug Motrin.
The same medicine found in the prescription drug Motrin.
Same as in Motrin in non-prescription strength.
The same medicine found in the prescription drug.
Did you ever notice that a lot of pain relievers seem to be saying the same thing? Well, if you want the same medicine found in the prescription drug Motrin, wouldn't it just be simpler to ask for Motrin IB? Non-prescription strength Motrin IB. You can't buy a more effective pain reliever without a prescription. Motrin IB. Accept no alternatives.
As part of our continuous coverage of the war in the Persian Gulf, these are among the headlines of this period. New threats from an Iraqi diplomat. The Allies deny Iraqi claims of the number of planes downed. The White House says now that there will be no, quote, pause for peace. Quote, the war has only just started. It will be a very long war. That quote is from Iraq's envoy to Belgium. The envoy also says Iraq is planning to attack Israel. He does not say when or how. Another Allied attack is underway now. Bombers began pounding Baghdad once again. David Martin at the Pentagon, our correspondent there, says new Tomahawk missile attacks have also begun. Those are cruise missiles basically fired from ships in the Persian Gulf. Baghdad radio says Iraq has shot down scores of Allied planes. The Allies deny it. The Pentagon says all U.S. planes but one have returned safely, and only one pilot has been lost, a Navy pilot in a Hornet aircraft. 2 British airmen are missing on a tornado jet. It's believed that they bailed out, and an effort is being made to rescue them on the ground. A Kuwaiti plane also has been downed. Now, the Allied version of the air battle so far is that the Allies total have lost 3 planes. 1 U.S. plane, 1 British plane, 1 plane piloted by a Kuwaiti with the Allied forces. The White House urged Saddam Hussein again to lay down his arms, in effect, to surrender. And U.S. officials vow now that there will be no, quote, pause for peace in the attacks, that the attacks will be unrelenting. For his part, President Bush says he's, quote, pleased with the way things have gone so far. He said the first strikes are part of a battle plan that includes, and I quote again now, all the tools in the toolbox. News from the Persian Gulf has sent stocks soaring on Wall Street. Oil prices have been headed down, as Robert Krulwich reported a moment ago. They've really been diving down today. Now, joining us in Washington is former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, William Colby. Thank you for being with us today, Mr. Colby. Questions. From your experience, are the strikes much more successful than anticipated, or is this part of a campaign to make things which are clearly positive seem even more positive than they are?
No, I think they're much more positive than anybody could have hoped. The high percentage of effective bombing, the small number of casualties. Saddam was obviously caught totally on the ground, which is the best way to catch an enemy air force. And apparently there's a lot of damage, not total damage, but a lot of damage was done to his air force. That will be followed up very vigorously in order to eliminate his air force as an element of the situation.
This is clearly, as General Powell said this morning, very serious business, and he said there's a long way to go. Your opinion, on the basis of what we now know, how long is this likely to last?
Well, I think the air part of it, taking out his air force, will take another three days, 3 or 4 days, something of that at the most. Then you start the ground process, but you turn the air onto direct support of your ground forces in order to beat up the enemy forces that they have to go and attack. And this will take a longer period, in the neighborhood of weeks, I would say, to drive them out of Kuwait itself, unless there's a mass defection of Iraqi soldiers, starting with the less disciplined militia, with the Revolutionary Guard sticking to the last, perhaps, but nonetheless the large force beginning to erode.
This is a comprehensive attack. The emphasis thus far has been on air, but additional parts of the attack will include land forces and sea forces, as you point out, unless the Iraqi military begins to crumble. Now, Ms. Kobe, that in Egypt, the government press there says that crews of 50 Iraqi tanks deserted their positions in Kuwait and surrendered with their tanks at Egyptian military posts in Saudi Arabia. That's the sort of thing you're thinking about could begin to avalanche against Saddam Hussein.
Could happen. I wouldn't believe the first report of that nature anytime, but then you cross-check it, find out whether it's true, and then you exploit it and let the other people know that that is what is happening, and that they begin to be tempted to go and join their fellows.
Mr. Kobe, I'm going to call on all your years of experience in the intelligence community and analyzing information. There is a school of thought that says that the United States wants to deflate Saddam Hussein, but not to completely destroy him. I hear people saying, well, why wouldn't we, once we're in a fight with him, want to completely annihilate him?
Well, it's important when you start a battle to figure out how you're going to end it. And the ending of this battle is still a little bit murky. Do you stop at the edge of Kuwait, or do you go ahead? Stopping at the edge is not enough. Do you want to occupy Baghdad and turn over the Iraqi government? In which case, how do you handle the jackals that gather around the body for the feast at the end? There are a lot of complications. I think the ideal, of course, is that the Iraqi themselves arrange a change in government in the traditional form in which the successor shoots the predecessor. That's how Saddam got in power, that's how his predecessor Qasem got in power, and that's how someday, either in the sooner or later, his successor will undoubtedly get into power.
Bill Colby in Washington, stick here with us. We want to play a piece of videotape now of President Bush today with members of his cabinet at the White House in Washington. Let's quickly see if there's any sound on this videotape. I think not.
The United Nations spelled them out. They remain the same, and he can call it anything he wants, interpret it any way he wants, but we are going to prevail. Don't want to get caught up in some semantics about all of this. He's got to get out of Kuwait, and he's got to do it with no concessions or no condition. That was determined long ago when he failed to comply with the UN resolutions, and now, in keeping with those, we are using force, and we're not going to stop until he fully complies with the resolution. So let's not worry about what we call it. Let's worry about if we want to make it clear, full compliance with the UN resolution, full compliance with the objectives of the coalition forces.
What do you think of his response so far? Lights, please. Thank you.
I think our people are doing very well.
Our CBS News coverage of war in the Gulf continues. As air attacks continue against Iraqi forces inside Iraq and in Kuwait, we pick up our interview with the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, William Colby, in Washington. Thanks for riding with us here, Mr. Colby. We just got that videotape in. I wasn't quite sure whether there's sound on it from the president. There was a very somber, taking care of business mien on the president's face, but also clearly relieved that things appear to have gone as well as they have so far. Mr. Colby, when you have these kinds of air attacks, what kind of casualties on the ground inside Iraq and Kuwait could we expect to find out about once we begin to get solid information on that?
Well, if you were in World War II, you would have large numbers of casualties because a large number of the bombs would not hit the actual target and would spread into other areas in the neighborhood. Today, with these modern kinds of weapons, so-called smart bombs, there's a much more tailored use of this kind of force. And I think the obvious testimony last night from Baghdad, that they heard a lot of noise, but they looked around this morning, and in the settled parts of the city, they saw no particular effect. If you go to an Air Force base outside Baghdad, I'm sure you'll see a lot of destruction, which is exactly what you want to see.
Mr. Colby, as you well know, and I say this with a smile because we know each other reasonably well, reporters get paid to be skeptical, and we've tried to bring a certain amount of skepticism to our coverage. We share with the families of those who have servicemen there the fear, worry, and even pride in what seems to have been accomplished. But bringing some skepticism to this. We were told much the same thing during the Panama invasion. We were told that civilian casualties were very low, for example. Now, you mentioned the so-called smart weapons. What are the probabilities that once we begin to get the casualty figures from Iraq, that it will turn out the bombing was not quite as precise as we've been led to believe?
Oh, I'm sure you'll find some bombs fall off point. There's no question about that. Murphy's Law is alive and well in wartime, and some things do go wrong from time to time. Of course they do. That's part of the fog of war, so-called. But I think you will have a much more limited effect of this weaponry. You'll have a lot of Iraqi military killed, and even families who are living with them on those bases, perhaps. But I don't think you'll see mass destruction in the middle of the cities and that sort of thing, because I think the controls are such that that is not the target, and that's not apt to be the main effect of the bombing.
Thank you, Mr. Colby. Tom Fenton is our correspondent in Israel. Tom, there is a renewed threat from the Iraqis today about going after Israel, being able to hit Israel. What's the mood there, and what's the reaction to that there?
From the Israeli point of view, what has happened so far is the best possible scenario. It could hardly have been better if the Israelis had written the script themselves.
I'm very proud of it. It was amazing, amazing, just amazing.
To hit all the targets in accordance to the plan without losing one plane. We didn't succeed to do it in the Six-Day War. We paid heavily for the achievement of air supremacy then.
There are few people on the streets. Under the state of emergency declared last night, only employees in essential services went to work today. Everyone else has been ordered to stay at home and follow instructions on radio and television.
Even though U.S. warplanes hit Iraqi missiles aimed at Israel, there is no indication that the missile sites were completely destroyed.
A total curfew has been clamped on the occupied territories. The Army has warned that Arabs engaged in civil disturbances can be shot on sight. The success of the U.S. attack is a bitter blow for the Palestinians.
If Saddam, he will not win, and I'm sure that he will not win, the people will be in deep depression.
The Israelis are grateful to the Americans for cutting Saddam Hussein down to size, but they're playing it safe. 2 or 3 missiles could still be launched against Israel, and that's enough to maintain the state of emergency. Tom Fenton, CBS News, Tel Aviv.
Among the latest developments in the Persian Gulf, U.S. and allied forces have complete control of the skies over Iraq. No one has yet a full and complete confirmed explanation about the paucity of resistance, although the widespread belief is that a combination of surprise and very effective weaponry and combatants in the cockpits of the Allied aircraft have simply wiped out the Iraqis' ability to respond, at least for the moment. Now, these are British planes, the Tornado fighter bomber aircrafts and pilots taking off from bases in Saudi Arabia. This is videotape taken earlier. This scene, we just have to pause for a moment. These are scenes, I believe, in bunkers and air raid shelters inside Saudi Arabia as they run tests on their chemical protection equipment. And again, we're back out on the airstrip from where the planes take off. This is all British. What we saw earlier was clearly they're working on their gas mask and their chemical warfare resistant equipment. There continues to be an alert inside Saudi Arabia for the possibility that somehow, some way, the Iraqis may yet get up some of their Scud missiles that could carry chemical weapons, or some other way get into chemical warfare delivery. However, most of the fear at the top ranks of that has faded. Let's pick up and see what this pilot's saying.
The final planning has just been dotting I's and crossing T's, as we would say.
Well, the crossing T's and dotting I's has gone very well indeed thus far, if one can believe the official reports, and there's no reason not to, in the main and in general, believe the general thrust of those reports, which is that the air power from the Allied side up to and including now has been overwhelming. Allied casualties in the first assault and in the second assault have been light. Preliminary reports say that one U.S. F-18 Hornet has been shot down, killing one Navy pilot, and a British plane with 2 persons aboard is missing. A plane piloted by a Kuwaiti is also missing. But given the fact that now well over 1,000 sorties have been flown by pilots such as these, that the official casualty figures are incredibly, perhaps unprecedentedly low for an operation of this size. Now, joining me here at our CBS coverage center in New York are our CBS News correspondents Susan Spencer and Bernard Goldberg, and our coverage of the war will continue. The latest headlines in our Gulf War coverage: more cruise missiles and warplanes pound Iraqi targets. The Allies report 3 planes and 3 planes only down. The Iraqis have another version. The French claim Iraqi chemical weapons capability in effect has been wiped out, but an Iraqi diplomat warns of chemical attacks to come if Kuwait is entered by ground forces. The Bush administration calls for surrender. Some of the hundreds upon hundreds of Allied air attacks on Iraq are being carried out by French Jaguar warplanes based in Saudi Arabia. Jaguar is a close ground support attack aircraft. The French say 4 of their planes have been hit in action, their pilots wounded, but the planes returned. The planes apparently returned okay, although the pilots were hurt. So far, the war in the main is in the air, almost entirely so, but Allied troops are massed near the Kuwaiti border. Some were reported moving north this morning by CBS News reporter Scott Pelley, and that's now been confirmed by military authorities. No word on when, or for that matter, if a ground offensive may actually come. Across America, dozens of peace protests all day in many cities. No word of any major trouble, and there are varying estimates on how large the crowds are. In the Arab world, it's another story. Thousands of Algerians staged a huge pro-Saddam Hussein demonstration in front of the Iraqi embassy. The Allies say that 3 planes have been lost, 1 U.S., 1 British, 1 Kuwaiti. Baghdad Radio says that the Iraqis have downed 44 Allied planes. The White House has called on Saddam to give up, but there are no signs that's about to happen. The successful offensive sent the stock market in New York soaring, while oil prices were sharply down, way down, and those prices, the oil prices, could drop still further. Exxon says it's cutting the wholesale price of crude oil by a nickel a gallon. Leslie Stahl is at the White House with word on the president's growing confidence in the success of the attack so far. Leslie?
Dan, the president obviously feeling good about what's happened so far. In his cabinet meeting just moments ago, he made it quite clear that the United States is going forward with everything we have. We are not going to stop, and he wants Saddam Hussein to get that message. Let's listen to what the president told his cabinet for 1 sec. Here it comes.
We are going to prevail. I don't want to get caught up in some semantics about all of this. He's got to get out of Kuwait. And he's got to do it with no concessions or no condition. That was determined long ago when he failed to comply with the UN resolutions. And now, in keeping with those, we are using force, and we're not going to stop.
The president was talking to his cabinet, but more importantly, he was talking to Saddam Hussein. He is not going to stop this massive, endless bombing. What the White House said this morning is, Saddam Hussein, give up. Lay down your arms, surrender, and announce that you are going to completely withdraw from Kuwait, and this will end. Anything less than that, anything less than laying down your arms and announcing a complete total withdrawal, and this endless, relentless bombing will continue. President being extremely tough, sending that kind of clear message over television to Saddam Hussein. When the president says we're not going to quibble about semantics, he's talking about his use of the word earlier of surrender. He apparently does not mean that Saddam Hussein has to step down as leader of Iraq. He means he has to pull out of Kuwait 100%. Dan?
Leslie Stahl. Rob McEwen is at the Wall Street Stock Exchange where things are happening. Rob?
Dan, a few moments ago or a few minutes ago, there was a cheer that went up and paper thrown into the air as the Dow Jones Industrial Average went 100 points up on its opening mark at the beginning of business today. It is now, as you reported recently, almost 106 points up on the close yesterday. And in a sense, there's almost a schizophrenic feel as we head into the last half hour of trading here. On one hand, people obviously enthusiastic about reports from the Gulf, and that's being reflected in a day in which there were 286 million shares traded so far, in which gold dropped $30 an ounce, in which oil closed at $10.70 per barrel down from yesterday, biggest one-day drop in the recording. On the other hand, there's a feeling, as we mentioned previously, that this may be somehow short-lived. Among the winners today, airlines, defense-based industries. Among the losers, petroleum-based industries, and especially those who had seen gloom and doom in the expected oil price increase are feeling much, much better as this day on Wall Street comes to an end. And probably foremost among the winners, the traders and the investors whose morale has undoubtedly been buoyed by events in the Gulf and this day on Wall Street.
Rob, has anyone there expressed to you any unease, any uncomfortable feeling about having these American young men and women with their lives on the line around the Persian Gulf, and then around the stock exchange they're talking about it being up 100 and everybody making money and the oil companies having their profits go right through the roof? Any expressions of concern or worry about that?
Well, I think they see it in quite an opposite way. This morning there were two bells at the start of the business day, one to signal a minute of silence for the forces in the Gulf, and a second bell to start trading. At the second bell, a spontaneous cheer went up. People stood, 2,000 people standing elbow to elbow on the floor behind me, cheering, clapping, stamping their feet for the people in the Gulf. And I think they see that the strength of the market today as being a vote of confidence for the men and women in the military overseas. So I think they see it in somewhat a different way.
Bob, you mentioned that this is the biggest one-day decline in oil prices on record, down to the $22 barrel range. The jump in the Dow, we're told, is the third largest single-day increase for the New York Stock Exchange. Susan Spencer has been following domestic reaction. Susan, a policeman I know, said to me, he said, you know, I've been covering these demonstrations the last few days. It was in a section around New York. And I see the same faces I see in nearly all the demonstrations. It sort of struck me, is that the case around the country? The same people demonstrate over and over the same thing? Or are we seeing fresh faces in these demonstrations?
I think it's very hard to say. I think you're certainly seeing true emotion in some of these demonstrations, even if they are the same faces. You know, I mean, sure, there's a core group of people. It's against war for any purpose, period. They're going to be out. I think it's early at this point to say if the demonstrations consist of a broader group than that, or not. I suspect they rather do. In any case, the protesters have been very hard at work all day. They have gathered in cities from New York to Stillwater, Oklahoma, declaring their view that in the long run, the U.S. action will turn out to be a very bad idea indeed. In Boston, about 500 demonstrators tried to make that point by pushing through barricades to get into the federal building. Riot police stopped them and 19 people were arrested there. Reports from a massive ongoing demonstration in San Francisco, meanwhile, indicate that tensions there are on the rise this afternoon. Already, literally busloads of protesters have been arrested. Police are promising more to come if the crowds don't disperse soon. Perhaps many more Americans, though, expressed their feelings one way or the other in prayer today. Church services throughout the country, this one at St. Patrick's Cathedral. And I suppose both the protests and the prayers will continue until we have some better sense, at least, of the final outcome here.
Thanks, Susan. Let's go over to Bernard Goldberg, who's been following world reaction. Bernie, there have been these reports, we touched on them before, about these scattered acts of terrorism, anti-Americanism around the world. Any new ones, or are we pretty much stuck with the detail of the earlier reports?
As of now, pretty much with that, but we do have some pictures in Dan just received from Algiers where thousands of chanting citizens came out in support of Saddam Hussein. Algeria is an Arab nation and had been working behind the scenes on the diplomatic front before the war began. Former Algerian President Bella visited Iraq just earlier this week and praised the Iraqis for their bravery. At the United Nations, Dan, all is quiet on the diplomatic front, no meetings going on by the Security Council, no meetings scheduled. The Secretary General earlier echoed President Bush in saying Iraq must withdraw from Kuwait in order to bring about an end to the war.
Saddam Hussein, in a conversation with him in Baghdad a few months ago, mentioned Algeria specifically as one of the places he thought where anti-Americanism would, as he put it, erupt in the wake of the war. Now, while there were demonstrations, as you mentioned, in Algeria today and some, at least, scattered violence there, one would hardly say that it's an explosion from within in Algeria or any place else in the Middle East up to and including now.
Yeah, that's right. He just doesn't have a lot of support, and this is one of the few places where he has some. Now, whoever said politics make strange bedfellows, what about war? Iran and Iraq were at each other's throats for about 10 years. They were killing each other left and right. Iraqi refugees are now fleeing to where? Iran. And Iran has sent a letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations saying they're welcome. So go figure.
Not only is war strange, but it's lethal. And emphasizing again how little we know about what has actually happened. Some of this may be by design, the lack of information, but a lot of it is just caught up in the mad chaos of war. For example, we have no idea what the casualties are inside Iraq. We don't really know what the situation is along the Saudi Arabian border with Kuwait and Iraq. There are these continuing reports of Allied troops maneuvering up closer to the border. Part of that may be diversionary. There is a school of thought, nothing more than that, that the schedule for the ground defensive part of the Allied attack may be moved forward because the air attacks on the basis of the official information so far have been so successful. All of those are things we're watching as we go to Bob Simon in Saudi Arabia, has more details about the only confirmed Iraqi counterattack against Allied forces in Saudi Arabia. Bob?
Dan, that counterattack was over some time ago. The guns were silenced, but you could still see the effects of it this afternoon. Smoke was still billowing from the oil refinery just near the Kuwaiti border in Saudi Arabia. It was going all day. It hasn't stopped now. We were just on the phone to Khafji, and the fire is not out. The flames are still there. You can see them from miles around. There were apparently between 30 and 40 shells that hit. They were taken out. The guns were taken out by Saudi helicopters today. And these are the Saudi helicopters returning from their mission. The Saudis are very intent on emphasizing how much they have participated in Allied operations. Dan?
Bob, do we know anything more about these reports that Scott Pelley actually eyeballed some troops moving up closer to the Kuwaiti border? Any more detail on what that could be about?
Dan, CBS newsman Peter Bluff, who just returned from Khafji, reported a line of armor between here and Khafji virtually uninterrupted. There is just so much on that road, and it's a long road. It's several hundred kilometers, and there is men and materiel going up there in an enormous, enormous deployment north.
And while we don't have a map to look at the moment, Bob, of course, there are enormous deployments going ever farther west in Saudi Arabia. If you can imagine for a moment the map in your mind, a map of Saudi Arabia, U.S. troop concentrations, particularly Marines, 24th Mechanized Infantry Division, pretty much along the road and just west of the road that runs along the Saudi Arabian coast of the Persian Gulf. Now, far west of that, armor, heavy U.S. armor is maneuvering and ever moving westward, which would indicate that either there are plans for a kind of flanking movement or it's a feint in that direction of some kind. All of this preparatory to what's expected to be a ground offensive. As the war began last night with those tremendous air raids, there was talk, well, the ground offensive wouldn't start for maybe 10 days or 2 weeks. Now, with the success of the air war, there are questions being raised, will possibly, underscore the word if you will, the ground offensive could start sooner than 10 days or 2 weeks, but no official word on that. We like to keep it straight with you, what we know for a fact, and what is conjecture, what is analysis, or for that matter, commentary. And the fact is that for the moment and through the first full day of the war, which we are now coming up on, the war started yesterday afternoon about 4:50 p.m. with the first preliminary airstrikes. That's 4:50 p.m. Eastern Time in the United States. The first full day of the war and night has been taken up almost entirely with air attacks. Now, Dateline Paris, France's Armed Forces Chief says now that Allied airstrikes have destroyed about 50%, about half of Iraq's Air Force. General Maurice Schmidt says coalition warplanes have caused, and these are his words now, on the order of 50% losses in Iraqi aviation. Yes, there were reports earlier in the day that perhaps as much as 80% of the Iraqi Air Force has been destroyed. The French Armed Forces Chief says it's about half, which is, of course, a tremendous loss for the Iraqis if true. The French chief predicts that the surviving Iraqi planes will probably be grounded for the rest of the war. One of the reasons for that is that many of their airfields, their airstrips, have been completely destroyed. Earlier, General Schmidt, this is the French general, said Iraq is no longer able to launch a serious chemical attack on Allied forces or on Israel. One of the early goals of the air war was to completely knock out the Iraqis' ability to hit Israel, or for that matter, launch their missiles carrying chemical weapons with any effectiveness in any direction. The French general says the launch sites for those Scud missiles were among the first targets of the air assault, and he believes the early air assaults knocked them out almost completely. Now, as the battle goes on in the Persian Gulf, and make no mistake, while the official casualty totals are low, it is a tremendous war that has erupted in and around the Persian Gulf. These headlines develop as our coverage continues. Baghdad is battered by yet another air attack. Allied ground forces reported maneuvering and moving up near Kuwait. Iraq is vowing attacks on Israel still. This is a fresh vow of yet attacks to come on Israel. President Bush meets with his cabinet, talks hopefully and confidently. U.S. Defense Department correspondent David Martin says more Tomahawk missiles are being unleashed on Iraq as the Allied offensive goes on. The Pentagon says that 80% of U.S. airstrikes have been on target. Over 1,200 sorties thus far. If it's anywhere close to 80% of the attacks being on target, that's an incredibly high on-target percentage. The entire offensive has been from the air insofar as we've been able to determine, but Allied ground forces are said to be moving north toward Kuwait's border with Saudi Arabia. That means primarily the U.S. Marine Force and the Army forces that have been in Saudi Arabia, most of them for about 5.5 months. The B-52 raids, so far as we can make out, and there have been B-52 raids, have been deep in the interior of Iraq and primarily in the northern half of the country. Iraq's envoy to Belgium says his country will use chemical weapons against the ground forces that the U.S. and its allies are mustering near the Kuwaiti border if those ground forces actually move into Kuwait. And the Iraqi vows an attack against Israel is still coming. David Martin also reports from the Pentagon that U.S. planners are, quote, cringing at the possible next move, and that would be a B-52 carpet bombing of Iraq's trenches. Cringing because that could amount to very heavy Iraqi casualties. If anybody's ever been anywhere near a B-52 raid, the ground begins to shake and quake. You don't hear anything, you don't see anything from the air, except the ground just begins to go out from under your very eyes. Not only is it devastating in physical terms, what the bombs do to anything that they hit, but it can be devastating psychologically. President Bush has had a meeting with his cabinet this afternoon. Mr. Bush says that he is, quote, pleased with developments. Defense Secretary Cheney said this morning, and I quote him, so far so good. That's pretty much the mood of the day in Washington. So far so good, but everybody emphasizes and continues to emphasize that while we've had, not only massive air attacks, we've had massive coverage, that this is still probably the early stages of a war. No one in Washington is yet talking about a short, swift conclusion to the war. We can all hope and pray that that happens, but nobody in official capacity is saying they believe it will happen. Indeed, people such as Defense Secretary Cheney and General Colin Powell, both of them very measured, cautious and careful men, are continually pointing out, listen, no one should jump to any conclusions. This is taking care of business. It's serious business. There could be a long way to go. Three major components of the attack, air, land, and sea, so far confined primarily to the air. The sea attack has been only the firing of the cruise missiles from big ships such as the USS Missouri and the USS Wisconsin. The Gulf News has sent stocks sharply higher and oil prices are plunging downward. Exxon has cut its wholesale price a nickel a gallon. Now we have more pictures of those British pilots taking off on missions over Iraq. These are the British Tornado fighter bombers. Let's just watch and listen for a second.
And there's no word for it. You're frightened of failure. You're frightened of dying. Oh.
It's everything. You're flying as low as you dare, high enough to get the weapons off, but you push it as low as you can over the target just to get away as fast as you can.
You've probably got to go out and do it all over again. What are your views about that?
We're ready.
We're ready if we have to.
We are confident.
It must be war. Mike Wallace is here. I mean, I didn't believe it.
We were just to the right of our lead aircraft, so it looked pretty good.
What about coming out? What was it like?
Very fast, very low, very dark.
Because you got your back to them, of course.
Yeah, we just basically it's a case of as the bombs come off, you just run like hell, and we just clear to the west. And in the distance, you see other attacks going off. A lot of flak out to the right.
That's about it. Two of his big airfields out to the right is about 30 or 40 miles away. It's amazing. It seemed to go on for about 15 or 20 miles as we were running westward with Ian trying to avoid odd bits of flak. We saw some tracer come off the target, didn't we? Yeah. Down the left-hand side. So he was trying to avoid that by going left. And all you could see out on the right-hand side was just a mass of white explosions. Yellow explosions which look like flak.
It's my wife's birthday today.
Your wife's birthday?
Yeah, happy birthday,
Maria. I mean, things are fairly quiet going on. That's probably the worst thing about it, because we were about half an hour of it and not knowing what was going to happen. Because I have to sit back and look at a few dials in the back waiting for radar emissions to tell me if somebody's looking at it.
Yeah. And there's nothing.
No sign of any enemy aircraft at all? A lot more of ours than
What was the first thing you said to each other after you'd hit the target, hopefully?
He shouted white. We were pretty low.
That piece of videotape, that is part of the pool arrangement, all subject to military censorship. Those were British pilots who've been flying missions north into Iraq, and over Kuwait. Bernie Goldberg reminded again this last time when I was in Saudi Arabia how what dedication it takes to keep the planes flying. You know, our concentration has been on the pilots. That film was about the pilots. But with the success of this air attack, it tells you how good the ground crews have been, how strong the maintenance have been. And in the kind of weather and sand conditions they've been operating, it's really incredible that they've had the aircraft at this high efficiency.
And the personnel at this high efficiency. This is what they've been waiting for. They've been geared up, they've been psyched up, and war has come, and they're clearly ready.
And when we spent all that money, when I say we, the United States spent all that money in refurbishing and rebuilding U.S. defense establishment during the 1980s, whether one approves of it or not, likes it or not, this is what we paid the big bucks for.
Yes, that's true, and I think we have to reiterate what we've been hearing, Dan, since you went on the air last night, that while things are going very well, while everything seems to be working, as you say right now, this may in fact really be only the beginning. If those troops on the border move in to Kuwait, the war really has just begun, and that's when we'll see if everything else continues to work.
That's true. And I recall a conversation with the U.S. Marine Commander, Walter Boomer, graduate of Duke, very philosophical man for a warrior, who said, listen, I'm going to tell you something. Saddam Hussein knows how to dig in, and he's really dug in Kuwait. General Boomer talked about his admiration for what he called the engineering of war that Saddam Hussein had built for his troops and had them dig in so deeply into Kuwait. Our CBS News coverage of war in the Gulf rolls on. Dan Rather, CBS News at our headquarters in New York, and trying to pull in the worldwide facilities of CBS News and its correspondents to bring you on a continuing basis a steady, reliable, dependable flow of information as the war continues. We want to emphasize the following. There's much more that we don't know than we do know. We know that the air attack is continuing, unrelenting. An encouraging sign from the Allied side. There were those who said, well, the Iraqi Air Force is not equipped to operate very well at night, but once daylight comes, the Iraqi Air Force will begin to try to give a good account of itself. Has not happened. In terms of air-to-air combat, and there has been some, we don't know many details about it, it is in truth a wipeout for the Allied forces. The French now believe that 50% or more of Iraq's air capabilities have been wiped out. David Dow is in Oceanside, California with military families. And David, I hope that you've expressed to them what we all know, and that is how much we share their worry, their concern, their fears, but also their pride.
Certainly will, Dan. You know, downtown Oceanside has grown progressively quieter in recent weeks as nearly 30,000 Marines from nearby Camp Pendleton have shipped out for the Persian Gulf. Today it has seemed especially quiet down here as residents joined with the nation stopped to look at television and to view the war that could soon draw those Marines into combat.
I don't know. I've had different reports. I've had that they're there. I've had they're on land. I've had that they're still on their way. I don't know.
Catherine Bannis, Robin Veranda, and other Marine wives are joined together by uncertainty, fear, and to a degree, relief.
I'm not glad that they have to fight, but I'm glad that something's being done, because the longer we wait, I think the more buildup that they're going to have against us.
Their husbands are in different units, deployed somewhere in the new combat zone. But today they are united in a common plight: how to explain a grown-up's war, now daddy's war, to their children. Catherine Bannis's daughter is just 3.
She's so sensitive, and it's really hard to see her so torn apart. And what do I tell her when he doesn't come home? She's old enough to know him. And, you know, what do I tell her? I mean, the only thing I can do is instill in her the pride that I have for the cause that he's fighting for. Even my 2-year-old says, "Daddy, come home soon." Well, what am I supposed to tell her? At least now I've got some kind of hope that it's started, therefore it will be over.
Nearly 40% of the students in Oceanside schools come from military families. In recent weeks, officials have stepped up security around the schools, and today crisis plans kicked in, consisting largely of what one official typified or described as being a great effort to carry on normally. Dan?
David Dow in Oceanside, California. Joining us again in our New York studios is retired, very recently retired, Air Force General Michael Dugan. Until very recently commanded all of the United States Air Force. General Dugan, this is an incredible bit of organization, and from what we can determine, very successful. Your successor, Air Force Chief of Staff, now General Merrill A. McPeak, as I understand it, he has more authority than any single Air Force commander has ever had in an operation such as this.
Well, Dan, one of the things that happened in the past couple of years is the passage of the Goldwater-Nichols bill. And the individual that in fact has more authority as a result of Goldwater-Nichols is the chairman. And Congress changed the rules and gave more authority to the chairman and to joint commanders, so that when we got to one of these kinds of circumstances, we could in fact fight more efficiently in a joint environment. That the commander would have more authority to pull together and to assign tasks to the various service elements and to make them work together well. General Horner is orchestrating the air plan, and he has a very thorough scheme that pulls together Navy, Marines, Army, and Air Forces, and our coalition alliance partners. That's done that very well, and I think we've seen some of the results of that success.
To make sure that people understand that there was a time when there was so much inter-service rivalry and so that the chain of command was clogged, was the way it was once put to me, that this bill you spoke of was designed to unclog the chain of command, to give the individual service commanders and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs more individual authority, and that you believe is what's resulted in this efficiency.
I think we've seen the results of some of that. I've witnessed some of that in Washington when I was service chief, that in fact the processing on the joint staff had a number of symbols where they were more efficient. They dealt with the principal issues and avoided some of the less important issues that I had seen the joint staff dealing with in the past. And so I think there are some positive outcomes that we can pick up in Washington and in the field from Goldwater-Nichols.
So, Dugan, we have only a few seconds left in this section, but Iraq now claims it's down 55 Allied aircraft. That's up in their claims. Any reason to believe that?
Iraq may have intercepted and shot down some of the cruise missiles that have come in. We don't get good feedback on cruise missiles, and they may in fact have made some mistakes by shooting at and perhaps shooting some of them down.
General Dugan's analysis and commentary, part of our continuing CBS News coverage of war in the Gulf.
This is CBS.
Y'all look hungry.
There's nothing quite so satisfying as country cooking Southern style. And now you can get it anytime you like. Introducing new Lux microwave meals, a whole cupboard full of hearty stick-to-your-ribs meals like Brunswick stew or chicken and dumplings. Sit down to one of these meals and you won't be getting up hungry.
Y'all better save some room for my peach pie.
Lux microwave meals, hearty country cooking Southern style.
Only a story this soft can be a secret. And only a bath tissue this soft can be called Kleenex. New Kleenex Premium Bathroom Tissue is specially layered with facial tissue softness on both sides, so all that touches you is softness. Only a song this soft can be a lullaby, and only a premium bath tissue this soft can be called Kleenex.
We take you live to the New York Stock Exchange where the final bell is just ringing, and on a history-making day in the New York Stock Exchange, really, our Rob McEwen is there.
And with a moment of silence for the troops in the Gulf ended, as you heard, with a cheer. The applause this morning was for the men and women of the military. This afternoon it was probably for the traders and investors themselves. It was quite a day on Wall Street. I'm going to have to look at the board right now to tell you how it ended. The Dow Jones Industrial Average ended at 2621.53, up 112.62 on 314,627,000 shares. The big story was oil. It declined, and dramatically so, at one point so quickly that it tripped the automatic shutdown at the New York Mercantile Exchange. That happens when the price goes up or down by $7.50 a barrel. And trading was resumed an hour later. Oil closed at $21.30 a barrel, down a whopping $10.70 a barrel for the February crude contracts. That's the largest one-day decline in history. And that traditional safe haven in uncertain times, gold, was down